Orientation Day at the Galactic Academy. The Galactic University of Sentient Species, known to most simply as GUS, floated like a gleaming shard of starlight near the edge of the Varellin cluster. Its orbit around the blue giant star of Keel bathed the station in hues of silver and violet, casting reflections across its multi-spired structure of alloy and crystal. Within its halls, life forms from every corner of the Orion Arm moved with cautious excitement. It was orientation week, and thousands of new students, avian, reptilian, insectoid, aquatic, and gaseous, poured into the Grand Convergence Hall, each marveling at the scale and strangeness of their peers. Excitement, however, was tinged with curiosity and something subtler. Caution. Whispers rippled from one cluster of students to another, drawing attention toward the central row of the amphitheater, where a single figure sat. Humanoid, bipedal, soft-skinned, wearing a dark gray hoodie with the words NASA in blocky white letters. A human, one of the first ever admitted to GUS. Avery Tran leaned back in his seat, legs slightly sprawled, sipping a hot liquid from a metallic thermos. He was acutely aware of the stares, but did his best to ignore them. His father had warned him this would happen. "You won't just be new," he'd said, packing Avery's bag. "You'll be alien to the aliens." Across the hall, a sleek Zerakian student, scaled and adorned with bioluminescent ridges, whispered in a clicking tongue to a Thelian water breather seated beside her in a floating hydration pod. "Why is it here?" the Thelian gurgled, filtering water through its voice box. "Their world is labeled a death world. A Class 12. A myth, surely," said another, a Mchari gas form whose voice pulsed like a slow wind chime. "No species survives long in such places." Before more speculation could erupt, the lights dimmed. A tall crystalline being stepped onto the center platform. Its form pulsed with inner light, an intricate lattice of translucent panels and glowing veins. It raised 3 of its 6 arms in greeting. "Welcome, initiates," it said. "I am Professor Thrazek, head of comparative xenobiology and survival ecologies. I will be your guide in understanding not only the body, but the world that shapes it." Murmurs of recognition spread. Thrazek was a tenured academician, famed for having cataloged over 200 sentient species and surviving field studies in black zone ecosystems. "Today," Thrazek continued, "we begin with a simple question posed by one of you." It raised a clawed finger, and text shimmered in the air above the stage. "Why is Earth considered a death world?" A sudden silence gripped the amphitheater. Dozens of compound eyes, photoreceptors, and antennae turned toward Avery. Thrazek's crystals pulsed with faint amusement. "Ah yes, humanity, a relatively new arrival to galactic awareness, and yet one of the most biologically perplexing." Avery just kept sipping his drink. He'd heard this tone before, the same one Ganymed and traders used, the same one his professors at the Terran Institute had adopted when describing insects that bite back. In galactic classification, the professor continued, "A death world is any planetary biosphere rated Class 8 or higher, indicating an environment where survival requires extreme physical or psychological adaptation. Earth is a Class 12. Gasps erupted. The Thelian's pod bubbled rapidly. A Creole bird-like student faintly fluttered its wings in alarm. Thrazek nodded. "Your surprise is understandable. Most advanced species arise from Class 4 to 6 worlds, stable climates, low predator density, predictable seasons. Earth, by contrast, is a maelstrom. Its gravity is higher than average. Its weather chaotic. Its biosphere violently competitive." The hall dimmed again, and a hologram flared to life above the stage, a rotating image of Earth. Storm systems swirled across oceans. Lightning lanced through clouds. Volcanoes glowed red in the dark. "This is the world that gave rise to humans." A few students recoiled instinctively. And yet, Thrazek added, "Not only have they survived, they have thrived. They harnessed fire while preyed upon by saber-toothed predators. They crossed oceans in wooden shells. They split atoms before they achieved planetary peace. The alien students looked toward Avery now, not with mockery, but a trace of unease. The human smiled faintly. You should see what we do for fun. Thrazek let the moment hang before speaking again. Tomorrow, we begin our in-depth analysis of Earth's evolutionary history. Come prepared and bring a strong constitution. As the lights rose, whispers followed Avery out of the hall. This time, they weren't laced with condescension. They were edged with fear and awe. Anatomy of a death world. The following day, the lecture hall was packed. Even students who typically avoided xenobiology, like the status-obsessed Ralvine or the water-sensitive Ontarii, had shown up early, crammed into the semicircular amphitheater. The air thrummed with restrained excitement, but there was also a new undercurrent, tension. The human, Avery Tran, sat calmly in his usual seat, feet propped up against the edge of the bench. A protein bar dangled from his fingers. No one sat beside him, not out of disdain, but uncertainty. Professor Thrazek entered silently, crystalline joints clicking with every step. The room dimmed once more, and the central holopad flared to life, casting an enormous image of Earth into the air above the class. Today, Thrazek began, we examine why Earth is classified as a death world. A pause. Let us start with the environment. With a gesture, the hologram zoomed in. Mountain ranges, fault lines, oceans, storm systems, all came alive. The image shifted through violent transitions. Hurricanes ripping across coastlines, earthquakes splitting cities, wildfires raging through forests, volcanoes spewing molten rock into the sky. In one solar cycle, the professor said, Earth suffers an average of 20,000 earthquakes. Hurricanes the size of small continents scour its oceans. Temperatures range from -90 to 60 degrees Celsius. Lightning strikes Earth over 8 million times per day. Gasps fluttered through the room. This level of natural volatility, Thrazek continued, would be extinction level for most intelligent species. And yet, humans build cities in flood zones, launch satellites during solar storms, and voluntarily climb volcanoes. A floating Thelian in the hydration pod muttered, voluntarily? Avery nodded without looking away from the display. Mount Everest gets tourist traffic. The pod bubbled violently. Next, Thrazek said, we consider the biosphere. Images flickered. Predators sprinting through savannas, venomous spiders lurking beneath rocks, snakes with infrared senses, parasites that burrow into flesh. Earth's evolutionary pressures are relentless. Predation, disease, environmental instability. Nearly every ecological niche is filled by something capable of killing or maiming. To survive, species had to become aggressive, adaptive, or elusive. The screen highlighted a panther leaping on prey, a shark breaching from the ocean, a Komodo dragon stalking a deer, and the apex species to emerge from this crucible. Thrazek turned toward Avery. Humans. He pulled up an anatomical schematic. The human nervous system, circulatory system, musculature. Internally, humans are exceptional. They possess a high basal metabolism, advanced immune system, and unusually rapid muscle recovery. Their bones are reinforced with calcium phosphate dense enough to withstand impacts that would shatter most sentients. Their blood clots quickly, allowing survival from deep wounds. And they have redundancy systems, 2 lungs, 2 kidneys, a liver that regenerates, and a brain capable of partial rerouting if damaged. A Creole student raised a feathered hand. But they appear soft. Ah, Thrazek nodded. Indeed. No external armor. No venom. No claws. But what they lack in natural defense, they compensate for with adaptability. He snapped a hand, and the projection changed again. Humans in deserts, humans in tundras, humans in spacesuits on the moon. They survive anywhere. Some tribes in the Arctic wear no insulation and sleep on ice. Others traverse burning deserts with no modern technology. They have lived at high altitudes, in deep jungles, even beneath the ocean's surface for extended periods. A buzzing whisper came from the Mchari gas form. And how many of them died to achieve this? Avery turned, meeting its cloudy form with a level stare. Too many, he said quietly, but never enough to stop the rest. That silenced the room. Professor Thrazek broke the moment by turning to another display, this time microscopic. Now we address Earth's invisible threats. Viruses, bacteria, fungi, parasites. Earth harbors over 1 million pathogenic species. Airborne, waterborne, bloodborne. Zoonotic transmission is common. Human immune systems must recognize, isolate, and destroy an evolving arsenal of microbial threats daily. Thelian's water rippled in panic. And they live with this? From birth, the professor confirmed. The immune system of a human infant trains through exposure. Dirt, pollen, even minor infections. It all contributes to a hyperadaptive defense mechanism. He looked directly at the class. Your species has medicine to fight disease. Humans are medicine. Their own bodies learn to fight. A palpable hush settled. No one spoke. Even a normally skeptical Ralvine leaned forward, fascinated. Thrazek stepped back, allowing the display to fade. You now begin to understand the foundations of Earth's classification. Not just because it is deadly, but because it is relentlessly, indiscriminately deadly. And yet, from that world, came a species that did not merely survive, but conquered it. All eyes drifted back to Avery. He stood, stretched, and slung his bag over his shoulder. This was just biology, he said over his shoulder, heading for the door. Wait till you hear about what we do with it. The door hissed closed behind him, leaving behind a silence thick with wonder. Monsters made in flesh and spirit. The next day, no one arrived late. Professor Thrazek's third lecture in the series drew not just xenobiology students, but cadets from the diplomacy wing, engineering interns, even a few visiting scholars from the archive moon. The subject line had been tantalizing. Human behavior, intelligence, aggression, and empathy. Avery Tran arrived as usual, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the crowd. For once, he wasn't the one doing the staring. Professor Thrazek began without preamble. We have examined Earth's environment and the human body, he said. Now, we explore something less tangible. Behavior, mind, instinct, and how humanity's greatest threat was itself. The lights dimmed. The holopad sprang to life with a vivid recreation. Early humans crouched around fire, crude tools in hand. Across the tundra, a predator stalked them, a saber-toothed cat, its fangs gleaming. The scene shifted rapidly. Humans with spears hunting mammoths in frozen wastes, building rafts to cross rivers, climbing cliffs, fighting one another with stone axes. They emerged not at the top of the food chain, Thrazek said, voice solemn. They earned that place through desperation and intellect. They did not wait for safety. They created it, not through strength alone, but through strategy, foresight, brutality. He let that hang before changing the display. Cave paintings, monuments, temples, cities. Some of you assume sentient species are naturally peaceful once intelligence arises. But for humans, intelligence and violence evolve side by side. A Zarak student shifted uncomfortably. But they grew beyond that, didn't they? Thrazek nodded. Eventually, but only after learning its cost. The display changed again. Flashes of humanity's darkest moments. Wars, famines, genocides, mushroom clouds. There was a collective intake of breath. The Thelian in the hydration pod began filtering faster. This is your species' history, a Creel student asked, voice small. Avery, still leaning back in his seat, responded. Yeah, we've done horrible things. We remember them because we have to. The room was silent again. But there's another side, Avery added, his tone softer now. The part that came after. The holopad flickered to life again, this time showing doctors carrying children through rubble, firefighters charging into burning buildings, astronauts waving from the surface of the moon. Humans destroy, Thrazek said, but they also rebuild. Faster than any species we've seen. And more than that, they care. The screen showed rescue workers pulling strangers from floods, volunteers feeding the starving, people shielding others with their own bodies. Empathy evolved in a death world, the professor continued. not as luxury, but as necessity. They had to bond, to cooperate, to grieve, to heal. Pain made them vicious, but also made them kind. He turned toward the class. Tell me, how many of your species have ever risked death for a stranger? Few responded. Avery raised a hand. That's kind of our thing. Thrazek smiled faintly. Indeed. The professor now changed focus. Let's consider psychology. Charts and graphs filled the screen, comparing neural pathways across species. Human brains lit up with activity in regions responsible for abstract thought, emotional nuance, long-term planning, and paradox. Humans are paradoxical creatures, Thrazek said. They fear death, and yet rush into danger. They suffer loss, and yet continue to hope. They are filled with doubts, and still act. Umchari floated forward. What drives them, then? Survival. No, said Thrazek. Meaning. He gestured toward the screen, which now showed music, art, literature, a painting of a woman with a mysterious smile, a man playing a violin in a war zone, a child's drawing stuck to the inside of a spaceship window. They create beauty in defiance of entropy, the professor said. They tell stories. They believe in something beyond survival. The aliens in the hall were silent, not out of fear now, but reflection. Avery finally stood, stretching slowly, then turned to face the class. You called Earth a death world, he said. Fair. But we weren't just shaped by danger. We were shaped by each other, by the need to protect, to matter, to be remembered. He met the eyes, or sensory orbs, of every student watching him. We're not strong because we're tough. We're strong because we've learned how to feel pain and still choose to move forward. That's our superpower. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was reverent. Thrazek stepped forward one last time. You have now seen how a death world forges more than just bodies. It forges souls. A hush settled over the crowd as Avery sat again, eyes forward. Somewhere in the rafters, a Creole student whispered to no one in particular. They are not monsters. They are survivors with fire in their veins. The final question. The lights dimmed one last time. It was the final lecture of the series, and the auditorium was at full capacity. Students sat shoulder to shoulder, some hovering in pods, others coiled on perches or resting in fluid tanks. The atmosphere felt different now, no longer filled with wary curiosity, but something closer to reverence. At the center, Professor Thrazek stood tall, his crystalline body emitting a soft, contemplative glow. This final session is not a lecture, he announced, but a dialogue. A low murmur swept the hall. A few tentacles twitched. Wings shifted. The students waited. You have seen Earth's chaos, Thrazek said. You have studied human physiology, behavior, and history. Now, one final question remains. He gestured upward, and a single phrase appeared, hovering in the air above the platform. Should humanity be welcomed into the greater galactic community? The room fell silent. Then slowly, voices rose. They're unpredictable, a Ralvine student offered. Their potential for destruction is unmatched. They're courageous, the Thelian added. But they risk so much, even when the odds are irrational. They don't stop, said the Mchari gas form. Even when logic dictates retreat, even when they're wounded, they keep going. They form bonds with anything, noted a Creel softly. Even species we consider lesser. They name their machines. They cry for animals. They grieve worlds they never walked. A deep silence followed. Finally, one voice cut through it all. They terrify me, said a small voice from the back. All heads turned. It was a juvenile Metsari, a youngling attending with an elder. Its chitinous body trembled slightly. They terrify me, the Metsari repeated, because they look like us. But everything about them is different. Avery Tran rose to his feet. He didn't look angry or smug. He just looked tired. Tired and human. You're right, he said, voice carrying across the room. We are terrifying. We've had to be. He stepped forward onto the platform where Thrazek stood. The professor gave a respectful nod and stepped aside. We come from a planet that tried to kill us every day, Avery continued. So we learned to fight, to build, to push back. But the thing no one tells you about surviving a death world is that it doesn't end when the danger passes. It stays in you. He tapped his chest. It makes you cautious. It makes you strong, but also makes you lonely, because no one else truly understands what it means to wake up ready to die and choose to live anyway. There wasn't a sound in the hall. Even the environmental hum had faded to a hush. "We didn't come here to dominate," Avery said. "We came here because we finally looked up and wondered if we were the only ones." He looked directly at the Met's sorry child. "We're not here to make you like us. We're here hoping you don't have to be." The child blinked slowly. Its trembling stopped. Avery turned back to the rest of the assembly. "You see us as dangerous. That's fair. But don't forget, we choose what kind of danger we become. We can destroy, yes, but we can also protect." He reached into his bag and pulled out a folded flag, the Terran Unity banner. Not of any one nation, but of Earth itself. He held it high. "This," he said, "is what we fight for now. Not power, not territory, but connection, peace." Frazek stepped forward once more. "I have lived centuries," the professor said, voice almost reverent. "Catalogued civilizations from across the stars, and I have never met a species so terrifyingly beautiful as yours." He turned to the assembly. "Vote with your minds, yes, but more importantly, vote with your instincts. Can you imagine a galaxy without humans in it because they are too much? Or would that galaxy be less for their absence?" Silence. Then slowly, one by one, appendages, pseudopods, wings, and voices rose. Approval. Unanimous. The record was logged, the vote sealed. Humanity would be welcomed, not despite their nature, but because of it. As the session ended and students filed out in hushed clusters, the Met sorry child approached Avery. "I'm still scared of you," it said honestly. Avery crouched down, smiling. "That's okay," he said. "We're still scared of ourselves too. But we're learning." They stood in silence for a moment, two species from opposite worlds, connected by something deeper than biology, the will to survive and to understand. And somewhere, far above them, Earth spun silently in the dark, its storms raging, its sun rising, its people reaching for the stars.